Hey everyone! Today, we're diving into 7 urban horror stories from Asia. If you enjoy them, don't forget to hit like and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's jump into the first story. One morning, the technical department of the industrial zone suddenly became bustling with activity. It was already 9 a.m., but Yoon was nowhere to be seen, which piqued the curiosity of 2 workers. One of them mentioned that Jan had left work early for his girlfriend's birthday the day before, so there was a chance the guy might have overslept. As soon as he finished his sentence, they saw another man rushing in, looking worried and breaking bad news. The man was dripping with sweat as he told everyone that Yoon had been rushed to the hospital after being involved in an accident. Without hesitation, everyone immediately rushed to the hospital to check on their friend. Upon arriving, they were relieved to find out that Jan was not in critical condition. They quickly asked the doctors about his situation, and while everyone felt worried, they learned that Jan had fallen from a high story. Lying on the bed, his face covered in bruises and cuts, Jan looked sorrowful and unable to move his body. 2 of his friends approached him and asked what had happened. He slowly opened his eyes, still appearing scared as he recounted his encounter with a ghost the previous night. The man had been invited to a birthday party where he met a woman he once loved and discovered that she was now married. Jan had drunk a bit too much and felt wasted. After saying goodbye to his friends, he staggered back home, unsure if he was even heading in the right direction. While walking, he stopped by a construction site and noticed that the road ahead was under repair due to its poor condition. However, Yoon kept walking because he was too drunk. He bumped into a sign and fell next to a large hole. Yoon panicked instantly. He was very close to falling into it. Crawling closer, he peered down and was terrified by its depth. Rocks and steel littered the bottom of the hole. Despite his fear, Jin felt blessed to have narrowly escaped death. Fueled by pent-up emotions, he angrily kicked the sign into the hole. As it reached the bottom, he laughed cynically, delighted to have removed the obstacle from his sight. All of a sudden, Jin felt the urge to vomit. He had clearly drunk too much. He went to a corner and threw up. Feeling somewhat relieved afterward, he turned around only to hear the sound of a motorcycle approaching at high speed. A couple was driving toward the construction site. Jin panicked, realizing they were heading straight for the large hole. Before he could react, a loud crash echoed through the area. Sensing something terrible had happened, Jin cautiously approached the spot. The scene before his eyes immediately filled him with terror. A dreadful look appeared on his face as sweat rolled down his cheeks and he ground his teeth, realizing he had made a fatal mistake. The couple had fallen into the hole. Their lifeless bodies lay in a pool of blood, their bike severely damaged. Both had died at the scene, and the sight was horrifying. Overwhelmed with guilt, Jin quickly ran away after witnessing the incident. Though it wasn't entirely his intention, his actions had directly caused the tragic deaths of the couple. When he finally made it back to his apartment building, he gently opened the door, careful not to wake anyone, all while praying that nothing bad would happen to him. He climbed into bed, trembling with fear and pleading for mercy. He even reassured himself that nothing bad would happen since it wasn't entirely his fault. The next morning, while his friends had already left for work, Jin was still half asleep. He tried to sleep a little longer, hoping the events of the previous night were just a bad dream. However, moments later, he heard something growling behind him. An eerie atmosphere enveloped the room, making his skin crawl. As he looked up, he was instantly startled by the horrifying sight of the couple dying in the hole the previous night. Covered in blood, they screamed loudly and threatened to kill him. Jin shouted in terror and covered himself with his blanket. It was then that he realized they were standing next to his bed, looking creepily menacing. In the blink of an eye, the male ghost opened its mouth wide, intending to devour Jin alive. Jin jumped off the bed, dodging the sharp nails of the dead couple as he fled in fear. But escape seemed impossible. The ghosts blocked the main door. Desperate, he made his way to the balcony, the only possible exit. Peering over the edge, his heart raced erratically. He was on the 7th floor. It would surely be suicide to jump from this height. He would undoubtedly end up dead, just like the couple. But that wasn't the only thing scaring him now. The ghosts approached ferociously, their eyes filled with anger. The male ghost extended its arm toward Jan, revealing sharp fingernails while grinding its teeth as it lunged at him. Jin recoiled in horror, finding himself trapped in a tight corner. He pleaded for mercy, but the male ghost showed no hesitation. It pushed Jin off the balcony as an act of revenge for what he had done the night before. Losing his balance, Jin fell over the railing in sheer terror. Screaming in despair, he flailed his arms as the ghost stared down at him, laughing demonically. Fortunately, Jin landed on a large tree branch, which significantly reduced the impact of the fall. Thanks to the branch, he survived. Lying motionless on the ground, his whole body paralyzed, he unconsciously gazed upward. There was no one on the balcony. After lying there for about an hour, he was found by a security guard and quickly rushed to the hospital. As Jan regretfully recounted the story to his friends, he urged them not to worry too much about him. His friends were astonished to learn about the tragic incident and hurried to the construction site. They noticed that the hole was being sealed by road workers. The worker confirmed that a couple had indeed fallen into the hole the previous night but had survived. They were currently receiving special treatment. The two men were surprised and decided to verify the information at the hospital. Upon arrival, a nurse informed them that a couple had indeed been brought in the previous night. The woman sustained minor injuries, while the man was in critical condition but had since stabilized and was slowly recovering. The two men then visited the couple's hospital beds. They were alive, which left them utterly confused. Jan had previously confirmed that the couple hadn't survived. The vengeful story he had told them no longer made sense. Now they began to suspect it might have been nothing more than a nightmare. There was a strong likelihood that Jan had hallucinated, haunted by the guilt of his actions, an effect triggered by excessive alcohol consumption that night. Disturbed by the memory of the construction site, he had jumped off the balcony and fallen to the ground. And thus, the truth unraveled. This is a scary story about ghosts and a young man named Xing, who had to endure all the misfortunes that befell him. Back when Xing was a child, one day a clairvoyant came to his house. The clairvoyant looked at Xing's face and said that the boy would grow up to be a glutton who was very greedy and would have to live off his parents. The clairvoyant then offered to change Xing's facial features, but Xing's mother scolded him harshly. She was deeply offended by his negative remarks about her son's appearance and told him to leave her house. She always had faith in Xing, believing he would become successful in life. However, as Xing grew older, he became a sponger at an early age. Anywhere he saw people eating a good meal, he would always join them or ask for a portion of their food. He didn't change his bad habits even after he grew up. Day by day, he went at everyone's houses asking for food and showed no interest in finding a job. His relatives were annoyed but didn't know how to express their dissatisfaction with him. One day, Xing asked his mother for some money because he wanted to attend a friend's wedding. As his mother put the money in an envelope, Xing opened it and found it was a bit too much for a wedding gift. He deliberately took out a portion of it for himself. At the wedding, the atmosphere was lively with people talking excitedly, but Xing was isolated. No one liked to sit near him, which slowly made him feel out of place and lonely. Drinking liquor, Xing suddenly felt a wave of embarrassment. He left the party, but no one seemed to care about him. On his way home, Xing saw a strange, good-looking young man slowly approaching him. The man asked, "Hey, are you one of the villagers?" Xing slightly nodded his head. The man then warned him to be careful walking on this path at night and to avoid looking at anything out of the ordinary if he didn't want to get into trouble. But Xing didn't take what the man said seriously. He kept staggering drunkenly but soon got startled by something before his eyes. There was a group of people sitting and doing something suspicious, which aroused his curiosity. Xing was utterly bewildered. It was already late at night. What were those people doing there? As the questions remained unanswered, Xing began to feel uneasy, realizing he had encountered a series of bizarre things lately. The group appeared to be eating something on the way. Strangely, they picked up dirty stuff from the ground and ate it hungrily. There was also an old lady waving at them, but Xing paid no attention to her. He had to find a place to urinate. After finishing his business, all of a sudden, everything around him disappeared. Even the tree where he had just peed was no longer there. Zing rubbed his eyes and instantly felt terrified. Was everything appearing before him a hallucination? Zing realized he was standing in the middle of a graveyard. The graves were placed haphazardly, and the atmosphere was eerily scary. He felt something wet underneath his feet. Looking down, he saw a mess of offerings, fruits, and wine spilled everywhere. It was at this moment that he terrifyingly realized he had just pissed on a grave. Zing was still in horror when, from behind him, a group of people unexpectedly rushed toward him. It was the same group he had previously encountered on the path. They looked extremely pale, their skin ghostly white, and their eyes completely blank. They asked Zing, "How dare you urinate on our place?" All of a sudden, a ghost that looked like an old lady rushed towards Zing, intending to rip his neck off. Feeling extremely horrified, Zing fainted, foaming at the mouth as he lay unmoving on the ground. A while later, Zing finally regained consciousness. He woke up and realized that the group of strangers had disappeared, but Zing was no longer calm enough to keep thinking about what had happened. He immediately got up and made his way home as fast as he could. As soon as Zing made it home, his stomach growled with hunger. He rushed to the kitchen, looking for food. He looked like a lifeless person. His parents heard the noises, quickly got up, and went to check. Seeing his son coming home late yet messing things up in the kitchen, the father angrily shouted, "What the hell are you doing? Wasn't the food at the wedding enough for you?" Zing remained quiet. He slowly took a knife and headed to the backyard without saying a word to his father. He made his way to the chicken coop and brutally cut off the head of the biggest rooster. The mother was terrified by her son's actions. She had no idea why he cut the chicken in half, which shocked her terribly. The father then approached his son, put his hands on his shoulders, and asked him why he was behaving like that. Zing slowly turned around. His eyes turned pure white, as if he were possessed. He then told his father that he was starving. Sensing something bizarre with his son, the man quickly reassured him that they would get food ready for him. He then told his wife that Zing had been possessed, which was the reason why he acted so strangely. He instructed her to keep making food to avoid worsening the situation. He quickly went to see a shaman. It was already 3 in the morning, and the paths were empty. He tried to go as fast as possible due to his great worry about Zing. When the shaman finally arrived at the house, Zing had just finished his chicken meal. Seeing the shaman, Zing spoke in a strange voice, saying he needed to eat more to satisfy his hunger. Zing ate frantically, rolling his eyes back into his head, looking as if he had lost control of himself. He kept eating until he was full, then leaned back in his chair, feeling as though his stomach was about to explode. All of a sudden, Zing's body convulsed constantly, and he foamed at the mouth. The shaman said he had been possessed and told his parents to tie him up with a rope in case something bad happened. She stuck a yellow amulet paper onto Zing's forehead, which had the power to remove the evil from his body. Zing screamed out in pain as he underwent the spiritual process. Suddenly, there was the voice of an old lady. She said the ghosts were very hungry because no one honored them or offered them food. The lady then told her story, saying she had been a miser when she was still alive. Even when she was bedridden, she refused to go to the hospital to save money. The lady told her son to tie her to her bed for 7 days, after which she died of starvation. Before she died, she told her son to bury her at the abandoned graveyard outside the village. Her request was immediately rejected by her daughter-in-law, but her son did it anyway, as it was her last wish. After her death, her brother was the only one who still remembered her. He occasionally went to clean her grave and offer food. The lady was furious that Zing had urinated on the food offerings, so she possessed him to find food to eat. The female shaman asked the ghost lady to forgive Zing and leave his body. Zing's family promised to make regular offerings of food to the spirits. As everything had been settled, Zing's father thanked the shaman and saw her off. Before leaving, the shaman told them to take Zing to a hospital for a checkup, as he had eaten many harmful foods. When Zing was taken to the hospital, the doctor was amazed to find out that Zing had eaten lots of uncooked food, even swallowed chicken bones, and his stomach was bigger than that of a normal person. This story revolves around the terrifying incidents that took place in a poor village located somewhere in the mountainous area of China. The protagonist of the story is a young man named Fong. He was a good-looking, gentle, and hard-working individual with a likable character. His daily job was to go mushroom picking in the mountains and then trade the mushrooms at the market. One day, as usual, Fong went to the forest on his own. The continuous rainfall that had taken place recently allowed many mushrooms to grow. Fong picked the mushrooms carefully, checked them one by one, and placed them into the bamboo basket on his back. Then he ventured deeper into the forest. As he was walking, he suddenly smelled a heavy, alluring scent drifting through the forest breeze. Fong was quickly dazzled by the lovely fragrance. He looked around and decided to follow his nose. The fresh scent led him further into the forest. To his amazement, Fong discovered that the source of this beautiful scent was actually a wild flower. But this one was different. It was the first time in his life he had ever seen such a strange-looking flower. The flower resembled a lotus bud, with small petals unfolding in circles around the white center. It looked similar to jasmine, both in its depth and petal structure. The pistils in the middle still had nectar on them. The heavy scent released from the flower and the aura surrounding it immediately caught Fong's attention. What amazed him most was that there was only one special flower like this growing in the middle of this deserted forest. Out of curiosity, Fong approached the flower. Suddenly, the flower gave off a strong, unpleasant smell that made him cover his nose and step backward. Later, he noticed large and long roots tightly binding the small flower, as if they were absorbing all the nutrients from the plant. As he walked along the roots, he saw a bush nearby. He approached it and found something mysterious hiding behind the grooves. Curiously, he grabbed the roots and tried to pull them out strongly, but something heavy seemed to be preventing him from doing so. Then the man came up with an idea. He followed the roots to see where they would lead him. His amazement grew as he realized the thing in front of him wasn't something underground. It was actually a pumpkin that had already withered. From the top of the vegetable extended a long root, the same one that had made him curious the whole time. Fong couldn't hide the disappointment mixed with a bit of surprise on his face. He kept staring at the pumpkin and wondered how there could be a pumpkin that grew in such a strange way. It seemed bizarre to him. Fong observed the pumpkin closely. It had the same size as a watermelon, but there were some dark spots on it that looked like they had rotted. He carefully examined the pumpkin and decided to take it home to sell at the market later, assuming he could get a good price for it. Perhaps he should show it to the villagers to find out what type of pumpkin it was. Encountering a pumpkin like this wasn't an everyday occurrence, so the man was curious to see what it looked like inside. He put the pumpkin in his basket and headed down the mountain. On his way, Fong kept thinking about what he would do with the pumpkin he just found. He continued pondering until he left the dense forest and returned to his village. Fong went to the market. When he showed the pumpkin to the villagers, they quickly gathered around to take a closer look. They asked where he had found it. Some were amazed to learn there was a pumpkin this big growing in the forest. They looked at it in awe. A young man among the crowd suggested Fong put it up for auction, but another villager told him to be careful with the pumpkin. The forest was considered a sacred place, and there was no chance for a pumpkin like this to grow in it. One villager suggested cutting the pumpkin in half to see what was inside. Fong agreed with the idea. He held a knife in his hands and was about to cut it in front of the villagers when suddenly a male voice called out from behind, "Stop it! Do not cut the pumpkin!" The villagers turned around. It was an old man standing at the end of the group. Fong was surprised by the man's remark and asked, "Why not cut the pumpkin?" The old man spoke in a solemn tone. "This spooky pumpkin has been cursed." The villagers began talking to each other in confusion. What if the old man was speaking the truth? If so, then Fong had brought bad luck to the villagers. Fong was extremely annoyed by what the old man had said. He snapped at the man, saying, "What you just said is nonsense." The old man remained calm despite Fong's anger. He looked at Fong and said that the pumpkin was not as normal and harmless as it might seem. Everyone was amazed to hear this. They asked how they could know the pumpkin was not normal. The old man then began recounting a story that had happened to him years ago. In the old days, during wartime, Japanese fascists had brutally killed people in the forest. They tied up those who opposed them with a long rope and made them line up horizontally in front of gun barrels. Then the commander would order the soldiers to shoot at them. After the gunshots rang out, blood spilled everywhere. The scene was horrific and terrifying. The souls of those who tragically died in the forest remained there, turning into blue balls of flame wandering around the forest, making the atmosphere always gloomy and cold. These souls were absorbed into a wildflower, which was very different from others. It was spooky and ghostly. Over time, from the spot of the wildflower grew a pumpkin, and it was the same pumpkin that Fong had brought home today. There were other places in the forest where white flowers like it grew. The villagers were scared as they listened to the old man. Some advised Fong not to cut the pumpkin, believing what the old man said was true. But the younger men in the village didn't think that way. They assumed it was just a made-up story to scare the villagers. The contradictory ideas from the two sides quickly caused fear and tension to break out. The atmosphere became tense and noisy, which made Fong extremely annoyed. At that moment, a group of young teenagers stood behind Fong and challenged him to cut the pumpkin open. The old man tried to talk him out of doing it, then turned around and walked away, not forgetting to say something before leaving. "One day, you will regret what you have done today." The old man's words kept echoing in Fong's mind. He stayed silent and felt bewildered. However, out of curiosity, he decided to cut the pumpkin open. As he reached for a sharp knife, he looked at the pumpkin placed on the wooden cutting board. Without hesitation, he cut the pumpkin with great force. It immediately split in half, and a terrifying scene unfolded before the villagers' eyes. Blood inside the pumpkin splashed everywhere. Following the cut, the villagers were scared to death by what they saw. There was nothing but blood inside the pumpkin. Blood was spilling everywhere onto Fong's body. Some couldn't even stand the fishy smell and had to cover their noses. The villagers blamed everything on Fong. They accused him of bringing ghosts to the village and held him responsible for it. The villagers left after the incident, leaving him standing there in bewilderment. That morning, the villagers had been scared out of their wits. They locked their doors as soon as they got home, not daring to go out due to their fear of encountering ghosts. The horror that had happened haunted them throughout the night. Fong couldn't sleep as he felt a burning pain all over his body. Despite not being scratched by anyone, pieces of his skin began peeling off and falling onto the floor. The smell of blood was all over his body. Fong felt itchy and extremely painful, as if some kind of invisible force was slowly tearing apart his layers of skin. In just the blink of an eye, the skin on the lower half of his face had been removed. Under the dim light, Fong got off his bed and took heavy steps. He was so scared and ashamed of his appearance that he covered his face and went to the old man's house, asking for help. He assumed the old man must know something about the white flower and the pumpkin and how to cure this obscure disease. If the villagers found out about Fong having this rare disease, they would definitely force him to leave the village, and this worried him a lot. Summoning his courage, he knocked on the door. A while later, someone finally came out to open it. The old man gazed at Fong and asked, "What's happened?" Fong looked at the old man with soulful eyes, then slowly pulled down the cover on his face, revealing the ulcers. He then said, "It was the pumpkin that caused me to be like this." Seeing the ulcers on Fong's face, the old man couldn't help but be shocked. He stood open-mouthed as he realized it was the pumpkin that caused this. The old man then told Fong to come inside his house. Fong was extremely frightened and pleaded with the old man for help. The old man gazed at Fong with disappointment as he had tried to warn him before, yet Fong hadn't listened. He told Fong to crush the pumpkin into powder and apply it onto the ulcers. "They will heal in 2 hours," he said. Fong was so happy to know that he could be saved at last, but he soon realized that he had thrown the pumpkin into the river that afternoon. The old man grabbed his flashlight, then told Fong to follow him to the forest to find an antidote. He knew where to find a pumpkin similar to the one Fong had found. The two set out to the forest at midnight. Fong asked the old man, "How do you know so much about that pumpkin?" The man then told him a story related to the curse of the pumpkin that had happened to him before. When he was young, his younger brother, Jan, had dealt with the same situation. Jan was just like Fong. he accidentally found a pumpkin in the forest and happily brought it home to show the villagers. They gathered around him, amazed at the bizarre pumpkin. Yin happily brought it home as a gift for his wife. That night, he and his wife had a small discussion about what to do with the pumpkin. The married couple and their son gathered around the pumpkin and decided to take it to the market to sell it for money. Suddenly, there were knocks at the door. The whole family was surprised because it was already late. They didn't expect to have a guest coming at that hour. A middle-aged man, formally dressed with a briefcase in his hands, came inside. The man introduced himself in a hoarse voice, but there was something unfriendly about him that made the whole family feel wary. The man said he came from the south and offered to buy the pumpkin. Seeing Jin hesitate about his offer, the man continued, saying that the pumpkin was actually a spiritual one and that he was willing to buy it at any price. Jan hesitated for a while, wondering how the man knew about the pumpkin. The man explained that it could cure some incurable diseases and was extremely rare. The villagers had told him about the pumpkin and directed him to Jan's house. Jan asked the man how much money he could pay for the pumpkin. The man raised 5 fingers and offered to buy the plant at a high price, one that was beyond Jan's imagination, 500,000 won. Jan was shocked. It was a tremendous amount of money to him. The man convinced Jan to sell the pumpkin to him, saying that while the pumpkin might have little value to Jan, to him it was completely the opposite. A scenario of enormous wealth appeared right before the young man's eyes. The man continued, saying that he would help Jan become the richest man in the village if he agreed to sell the pumpkin to him. He also asked Jan to take him to the forest to show him where pumpkins like this one grew. Of course, Jan would earn a high commission for taking the man to the place. Jan didn't hesitate to take the offer. Things happened so smoothly that he didn't know what to do except gladly accept it. But the man wanted to go to the forest right at that moment, which amazed the whole family, as it wasn't a good idea to go to the forest in the middle of the night. Jan refused to take him to the forest, feeling uneasy about leaving his wife and son at home this late. So he suggested waiting until the sun came up, and then they would set off. But the man insisted, saying he couldn't wait. He even offered to raise the price for the pumpkin if Jan took him to the forest immediately. Now Jan couldn't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He agreed with the man's offer, said goodbye to his wife and son, and reminded them to lock the door. He told them that he would be back soon. Then Jan and the man set off on their journey. With a worrying expression on her face, the wife told Jan to be careful. It could be dangerous to go to the forest this late. Jan reassured his wife, saying he would be back home soon. The woman held her child in her arms and gazed at her husband with anxious eyes. She felt insecure, sensing something mysterious about the man. The two watched Jan and the strange man walk their way to the forest until their figures faded into darkness. That night, as the woman had lulled the child to sleep, she was still thinking about her husband. The sun had come up, but Jan hadn't returned. Sensing something bad had happened, she told the villagers about the incident and asked them to help her find January. The villagers agreed to go to the forest to look for Jan and the mysterious man, as they also believed there was something dangerous and untrustworthy about the man. They went to the forest, split into smaller groups, and searched in different directions, calling out his name. Their voices resounded throughout the forest, but there was no answer from him. It wasn't until noon, when everyone was tired, that a group of young men witnessed a shockingly terrifying scene. Everyone was freaked out by what they saw. It was brutal and dreadful. As Jan's wife rushed to the scene, she couldn't hold back her tears and burst out crying loudly. The mysterious man had killed January. His body leaned against a tree, mouth opened in fear, while his eyes were wide open. The wife rushed to her dead husband, hugged him, and cried out in extreme pain. A gloomy atmosphere pervaded the whole forest. The villagers were determined to find the mysterious man to take revenge on him. There was a high chance that he was still in the forest. The villagers separated into smaller groups to search for the man, their faces filled with intense and furious looks. One villager found a clue about the man. He kept searching, and as he walked a bit longer, he screamed out loud and fell to the ground as if he had witnessed something truly scary. The other villagers rushed to see what happened. The young man pointed to the place he had just seen the horror. Everybody was shocked by the scene before their eyes. The mysterious man was dead, He lay next to the tree roots, mouth wide open, just like January. However, he was still tightly holding the pumpkin that Jan had shown to the villagers. The expression on his face was bizarre yet horrifying. By the look of his face, one could easily tell the man had witnessed something truly scary while keeping the pumpkin with him. Everyone was freaked out. That morning, the villagers had found 2 dead bodies in the forest. There was a strong likelihood that the man was killed by the ghosts in the forest. The villagers believed it was a fitting punishment for the man, as he had previously killed Jin in such a brutal manner. As the old man finished telling his story, Fong asked him, "So what happens after that? Who was the mysterious man?" The old man calmly replied, "He was a grave robber from the south who specialized in trading spooky things." Fong expressed his amazement. "How did you know so well about the pumpkin?" The old man then confessed that he was told about its magical uses by his master, but he never truly believed it. These spooky pumpkins could absorb the souls of dead people. Although they couldn't cure many incurable diseases, they were extremely dangerous. The 2 then reached the end of the forest. At this moment, Fong realized that they had arrived at the spot where he had found the pumpkin and the white flower. Both Fong and the old man saw the long roots lying on the ground. The old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. He made a cut into one of the roots, and from the cut, a white sap oozed out. The old man told Fong to apply the white sap on his face and the ulcers. The old man gazed at the tree roots and looked worried. He believed that the tree roots were still developing, and there would be other pumpkins growing in the forest. Then the man suddenly recalled having a book from his master that illustrated a way of removing these tree roots. He didn't expect that one day he would have to use it. The next morning, Fong went to the old man's house. The 2 carried bamboo baskets loaded with yellow powder, which was made by the old man himself. Then they set out to the forest again. As they arrived at the spot, the old man sprinkled the powder on the tree roots. Oddly, as the powder was sprinkled on them, the roots quickly shrank and became withered. Fong followed him and did the same. The tree roots altogether withered and died. The old man then took out an incense burner and lit 3 incense sticks. He made an altar to honor the souls wandering in the forest and also free them. The atmosphere in the forest suddenly became warmer and fresher. The 2 went down the mountain after finishing their work in the forest. The tree roots were reborn once again. They wrapped around the big trunks and sprouted a white flower. This is a scary story that my father once told me. It happened to him when he was young. That day, my father and his colleagues went to visit a mutual friend of theirs. The 3 of them drank excessively, and as midnight struck, my father said his farewells to the other 2 men. One of them accompanied my dad to the gate and reminded him to be careful along the way as my father walked down the familiar street. He realized it looked a bit strange, more unusual than it normally had been. He took a deep breath and stepped into the pitch darkness. The gusts of wind gave my father a comforting feeling as he made his way back home. A while later, my father arrived at a 3-way junction. Confused by the roads ahead of him, he decided to take a shortcut. As he kept walking, he suddenly realized that in order to get home, he had to pass through a forest. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he stepped on the dead leaves scattered across the ground, creating a sound that echoed throughout the entire place. My dad kept walking without paying much attention to what was happening around him. However, something strange was going on. Why was there so much fog in the forest at that time? The wind was blowing lightly, and the atmosphere felt eerily scary. My father finally sobered up for a moment. He looked around and realized he was in the middle of a dense forest. There was no light at all. Suddenly, he heard a noise. My father walked toward the direction of the sound to see what was going on. As he slowly approached, he saw a group of men gathered together, singing and dancing cheerfully as they sat in a circle. Out of curiosity, my father walked over to the group and said, "Hey, I want to join you guys." My dad had a passion for singing and dancing. He never missed an opportunity to participate in such activities. That's why he asked to join in. With an excited look on his face, fueled by drunkenness, he danced with the group of strangers all night. and didn't even bother to go home. When it was nearly morning, my father had fully sobered up. He instantly realized that something wasn't right. The scene before his eyes had changed. The group of men who were dancing around him suddenly became disfigured, making them look like monsters. As my dad rubbed his eyes repeatedly, he became even more terrified by what he saw. The shapes of the people around him became increasingly distorted. Their faces looked lifeless, and they moved very slowly, almost as if they were floating off the ground. They were also stammering, but the sounds coming out of their mouths were haunting. All of a sudden, one of the men had his head twisted around. It looked incredibly creepy. Their dance moves had also changed. They were far more disturbing now. My dad was completely bewildered. He tried to escape, but the ghosts didn't let him leave. They surrounded him in a circle. My dad screamed out in fear, pushed his way through the crowd, and ran away, leaving the ghosts behind as they tried to grab him. As the forest grew darker, my dad slowly realized that he was lost. What was even more terrifying was that the tall, mighty trees unexpectedly became twisted. They didn't even look realistic, which scared him to death. Sudden thoughts popped into my dad's mind, making him feel dizzy. A completely new world appeared before his very eyes, one that was scary and spooky. Then, my father found himself standing in the middle of a maze of roads. He panicked, unsure of which road to take. He thought to himself that he was being tricked by the ghosts in the forest. Sweat poured down his face as he tried to step forward, but his steps unknowingly became heavier, causing him to walk sluggishly, as if he were exhausted. The atmosphere in the forest also became scorching hot. The high temperature wore him out, turning his face pale and drenched in sweat. A few moments later, he felt numb throughout his entire body. All of a sudden, my father felt giddy, as if he had no strength left in his body. He slowly closed his eyes and walked forward in confusion. The tree leaves fluttered in the breeze, and the things appearing before his eyes became dark and blurry in the night fog. My dad was scared. He tried to regain his consciousness while searching for a way out of the spooky forest, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't even get up on his own. Things started getting more and more blurry. My dad was no longer aware of anything around him as he slowly fainted. The next morning, my father was awakened by sunlight shining down through the forest canopy. He slowly opened his eyes and saw two men staring at him with worried expressions on their faces. The men asked if my dad was okay and inquired about how he ended up in this forest. A while later, my father had fully regained consciousness. There were scratches all over his body, and he couldn't even lie on his side due to fatigue. His face remained pressed against the ground. As the smell of alcohol emanated from my father, the two men guessed that he had gotten lost on his way home because of drunkenness. They lifted him up and offered to take him home. As they made their way out of the forest, my dad turned around and gazed back at it. He recalled everything that had happened to him, though the questions in his mind still remained unanswered. Later, my father discovered that there was a particularly scary flower called ghostly grass in this forest. The flower could cause hallucinations to those who were exposed to it at night. It emitted a scent that caused anyone who breathed it in to experience vivid hallucinations. Woodcutters also reported seeing things deformed when they entered the forest at night. After the incident, my father never dared to get wasted again, nor did he ever go to the forest late at night. It still haunted him to this day, and he continues to forbid me from entering the forest. This is a scary story that my grandfather once told me. Back in the day, we worked as farmers, and after every rice harvest, haystacks were placed in the front yard. These piles of hay had various uses. They could be used to feed calves, build roofs, or make fires. The haystacks also served as a playground for the village children who would climb up and down them all day without ever getting bored. The women were often seen sitting next to the haystacks, chatting, knitting, or doing other tasks. It was safe to say that these haystacks were etched into the village's memory. During that time, There was one particular haystack that was believed to be haunted by ghosts. It was located near the forest, and everyone avoided walking near it at night. One day, a young man had to work outside in the afternoon and returned home late at night. Despite knowing it was dangerous to pass by the haystack at this specific time, he had no other choice. It was the only path that led to his home. He was the only one walking on the path. He thought about the scary stories the villagers had told and felt a shiver run down his spine. Still, he believed nothing bad would happen to him since he wasn't a squeamish person. But what happened next was completely unexpected. It was on that night that he witnessed something truly horrific. The man screamed loudly as he looked at the haystack. His face turned pale, and he panicked, trembling uncontrollably. When the villagers took him home, the man was still scared and trembling. He covered himself with a blanket. No one knew what had made him behave like that. Tremblingly, he covered his face with his hands and muttered something under his breath. Sometimes, people heard him say words like ghost or eyeless. A while later, another scary incident occurred. One day, the man's son suddenly became stubborn and cried a lot, which was very out of character. However, the man didn't seem bothered by it. He kept watching TV and ignored his child. His wife was upset to see him behaving so irresponsibly. She angrily asked him why he didn't calm their child and play with him. The man, irritated, replied, "There's no need to calm him down. He'll stop crying anyway." What the man said was unacceptable to his wife. She vented her frustration on him and scolded him harshly. For the past 2 months, the man had been lying at home, refusing to find a job, even though they were running out of money. Disgusted by her husband's behavior, the woman shouted, "Why don't you just go out there and look for a job on your own? Stop acting like you know everything when you clearly don't." The woman was triggered by her husband's remarks. After all, for the past 2 months, she had been the one taking care of the family and feeding everyone. The man now became even angrier. In a moment of rage, he told his wife to take their child and go back to her mother's house to live a happy life, as he was no longer financially capable of supporting them. The woman didn't expect that one day she would be humiliated like this. She packed her clothes and left the house with her child. The man now regretted what he had said to her. He knew it was late, and going out at this time would be dangerous, but he didn't want to lower his ego for them. So, he intended to pick them up the next morning. He wanted to give his wife time to cool down her anger. Moreover, it had been quite a while since she visited her parents, so this could be an opportunity for a family reunion. The woman also regretted being too harsh with her husband, which was very out of character for her. Besides, it was a terrible idea to go out so late. As they walked along the path where the spooky haystack was located, her child trembled uncontrollably. He grabbed her shirt, feeling scared and wanting to go home. But, similar to her husband, the woman didn't want to deflate her ego. She reassured her son that he didn't have to be scared because she was there with him. As they kept walking, they had the unsettling feeling that someone was stalking them. When the child expressed his anxiety to her, she realized there was definitely someone following them. As they got closer to the haystack, the child started trembling more violently. He held his mom's hands tightly. The woman felt extremely anxious. Her forehead was dripping with cold sweat. The haystack now looked creepier than it normally did. In the sky, the moon was covered by layers of clouds, and only a shaft of moonlight shone down the path. The freakish coldness soon prevailed over the village, and as her anxiety grew, she heard the sound of light footsteps behind her. She turned around to check if there was anyone, but the pitch darkness and empty space made her feel even more terrified. Suddenly, the child let out a cry, startling her. He pointed out that someone was standing in front of her, next to the haystack. It was sheer luck to know that there were still people around her this late. The woman felt less scared now and gave a sigh of relief. 2 people could be seen at the spot. One wore a blue shirt, and the other wore a red one. They appeared to be a boy and a girl, around 10 years old. Since they were standing in the darkness, she couldn't make them out clearly. The 2 were facing their backs to the woman and the child. She called out to them, but neither reacted. Thinking they hadn't heard her voice, she walked closer to them. The woman could tell by their appearance that they were 2 kids, around 10 years old. When she asked them why they were out here so late, the The two still ignored her question, despite her being very close to them. The woman then patted the shoulder of the one wearing the blue shirt, whom she believed to be the older one. Instantly, the kids turned around and stared at her. But their faces didn't look like those of normal human beings, only bones and teeth were visible. There was no flesh on their faces. The eye sockets were empty and completely black, giving her the impression that they were staring into her soul. Feeling shocked and panicked, she let out a fierce scream and fell backward, hitting her head on the ground. She fainted, while her son cried out helplessly, watching his mom in danger. After the incident, the woman's health declined as she was still haunted by the horrific scene. After having a checkup, the doctor told her that she was suffering from a psychological disorder caused by depression and stress. But as soon as the doctor finished his sentence, the woman sat up and repeatedly screamed, "Ghosts! Ghosts! There are ghosts!" in an extremely horrified manner. The husband quickly hugged his wife so she wouldn't jump off the bed. He comforted her and then asked her what had happened. But the woman just kept repeating the word eyeless. Both the husband and the doctor were utterly bewildered. They couldn't figure out what had caused the woman to be so scared. Knowing he couldn't get any information from his wife, the man turned his attention to his son. The child was still trembling fearfully, his eyes filled with tears. He burst into loud sobs as his father asked him about the incident. He told his dad everything from the moment they walked near the haystack to when they saw the ghosts and how his mom fainted. But before the child could return home and inform his dad, the two ghosts had disappeared into the pile of hay. The husband and the doctor gazed at each other, sensing something bizarre. Lately, they had heard rumors about the spooky haystack. A few weeks ago, a person was reported to have developed a mental illness after encountering it. The next morning, the husband went to see the village chief and informed him about the incident. Just like him, the villagers agreed to remove the ghostly haystack at once. Some young men brought their tools to get rid of it. As they dug deeper toward the bottom of the haystack, they smelled a foul stench coming from it. When they finally removed the haystack, what was buried underneath instantly terrified them. Out of curiosity, the villagers quickly gathered around the spot. What appeared before their eyes were the corpses of two children, around 10 years old. They were badly decomposed, only human bones and their clothes, including the red shirt and the blue shirt, remained. The police quickly arrived at the scene. It turned out that the children were from a nearby village. They had been reported missing 3 months ago. Their parents had thought they had been kidnapped, as they couldn't find them anywhere. But to everyone's amazement, the children were believed to have hidden underneath the haystack, only to suffocate and turn into ghosts wandering around this place. This scary story took place at a coastal village, a place that was covered with thick fog all year round. That day, Mr. Seuss's family held a party to celebrate his grandson's 10th birthday. The whole family gathered around, singing birthday songs to the child. The boy then made a wish and blew out the candles on the cake. He cut the cake into pieces and left the best slice for his grandfather. He placed the cake on a white plate and handed it to Mr. Sue with both hands. Since the boy had drunk a lot of soda, he told everyone that he needed to go to the restroom as he was about to rush out of the house and head straight to the bathroom. He suddenly froze at the sight outside. The pitch-black night in the countryside, combined with the freezing fog, terrified him. As soon as he opened the door, he went back inside and spoke in a trembling voice. His face turned pale as he tried to hold his pee. Later, he had to ask his father to accompany him to the toilet. The father comforted his son as he led him to the restroom, saying, "A boy must be brave and courageous in order to achieve great things in life." The child replied that he had seen a figure outside gazing into the house, which had scared him. The father assumed there must be someone stalking them, or perhaps just a neighbor coming over to their house. But when he looked outside, there was no one there. He told his son to go into the toilet while he waited outside and smoked a cigarette to keep himself warm. Suddenly, a strange noise startled him. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the sound, then saw a figure that appeared to be a woman. Feeling doubtful, unsure whether it was a woman or a ghost, he yelled, "Who's that?" The grotesque shadow stood right at the door. Due to the thick fog, he couldn't make out who it was. Feeling annoyed, he shouted loudly, "Who are you?" The shadow disappeared instantly, leaving him gaping in astonishment. The man reflexively rushed outside to check, but there was nobody in sight, which terrified him even more. As he had no idea what was happening, his son walked out of the restroom in a strange posture. He looked oddly like someone who had lost his soul. He looked down as he headed back to the house, covering half of his face. What was worth noticing here was that his crotch was soaked, as if he had peed in his pants. Seeing the bizarre behavior of his son, the father called his name loudly, but the boy didn't reply. He just went straight back into the house. When he got inside, his face looked horrifying. One of his eyes was wide open, while the other was narrowed. His mother was scared to see one of her child's eyes injured. She screamed loudly, but the boy just fixed his gaze on the food on the table. He rushed to the table like a starving tiger, grabbed the food, and greedily devoured it like a hungry ghost. Never in his life had he eaten this much, so everyone felt worried about him. Mr. Sue placed his hand on his grandson's shoulder and asked, "My grandson, are you okay? Don't eat like that, or you'll choke." All of a sudden, the child started trembling, reached for a fork on the table, and stabbed it into Mr. Sue's eye. The sharp fork went straight into the man's eye, causing him to fall backward. Blood spilled everywhere. The scene became extremely frightening. Everyone rushed to Mr. Sue as he screamed in horror. Mr. Sue's son instantly took him to the hospital. As they were a few steps out of the house, the child giggled hysterically. His mother looked at him in a scared manner. The boy suddenly acted in such a spooky way, as if he had been possessed by a demon. He watched his grandfather while laughing delightfully. The next morning, Mr. Sue returned home from the hospital. According to the doctor, his injured eye had been permanently blinded. The grandfather sat in the living room while his grandchild had been locked in a room by his parents. The boy smashed things and screamed loudly. He was no longer a normal 10-year-old child. Now, he looked like a ferocious, bloodthirsty demon. The parents sighed deeply. They didn't know what had happened to their child. After thinking for a while, Mr. Sue told them that the boy had been possessed. The man was amazed by his father's remark. Mr. Sue told him to sit tight. Tomorrow, they would have to ask an exorcist to remove the evil spirit from the child. Everyone was sleepless that night. The couple was in great pain as their son had to endure such a terrible incident. The woman thought she was hurt to find out that the villagers had circulated rumors that her child was mentally unstable. The husband reassured his wife, but the woman couldn't stop crying. She spoke with tear-filled eyes, feeling scared that her child would not recover and would live the rest of his life as a psycho. The next morning, the villagers gathered at Mr. Sue's house to witness the exorcism. Some said the boy had lost his mind, while others claimed he had been possessed by an evil spirit or developed a mental illness. An altar was placed in the middle of the yard. The husband and wife tied up their child and put him on a chair. The boy became furious as soon as he saw the exorcist. His eyes were filled with anger, as if he wanted to eat her alive. The exorcist grabbed a rooster by its neck and slashed its throat with a knife. She let its blood drip into a bowl while muttering some spells under her breath. The exorcist picked up the bowl and drank the blood, but instead of swallowing it, she kept it in her mouth. She slowly approached the boy. The closer she got, the more violently he shook. The exorcist spat the blood in her mouth onto the boy's face. Then, she took out a yellow stick made of animal fur from her bag and performed a ritual dance around the boy. The boy screamed at the top of his lungs, saying that he would take revenge on the woman. All of a sudden, his eyes grew wide, as if they wanted to pop out. One of them turned black, and a wisp of black smoke came out of it. Then, the child sat motionless with his face down. The mother rushed to her child, calling his name. A few minutes later, the boy opened his eyes. Thinking their child had returned to normal, the couple was delighted. The woman hugged the child in her arms and burst into tears. They untied him and expressed their gratitude to the exorcist. But the woman didn't say anything, sensing something wasn't right. Mr. Su approached the exorcist and asked if she was okay. Suddenly, the woman let out a scream and bit her lips painfully. Unexpectedly, the exorcist picked up her stick and stabbed it right into one of her own eyes. The scene was so disturbing that it shocked everyone present. The family members were dumbfounded as the woman collapsed on the ground and died. Lying in the middle of the yard, amidst the crowd, a beggar appeared. He screamed loudly as he witnessed the incident. His face turned pale instantly. The beggar pushed his way out of the crowd while continuously screaming. Since that day, Mr. Su had been bedridden, fearing that he wouldn't overcome his illness. He told the secret he'd been hiding to his son and daughter-in-law. As he recalled his memories, he told the couple about a murderer that he, the female exorcist, and the beggar were involved in. The couple couldn't hide their amazement as their father revealed he had something to do with the bizarre incident affecting their family. Mr. Su felt painful. He burst into tears and then told them everything. Back when he was young, he and the beggar had sworn brotherhood. One day, after drinking a few shots, the two men felt slightly drunk. They went to an alley and smoked cigarettes. As they saw a woman walking by, the two intended to rape her. The beautiful woman had just turned 18 at that time. The beggar was the first to approach her. As he blocked her way, the two men found it amusing to see the young woman scared and teased her constantly. One of the men rushed to her and grabbed her arms. The woman tried to defend herself but failed, as the man was too strong for her. He dragged her away. The two took her to a nearby warehouse. The beggar intended to rape her, but the young woman reacted violently. She scratched his face, which hurt him badly. The pain aroused the ferocity within him, and he slapped the girl hard in the face, pushing her head backward. Little did he know that there were sharp wooden sticks behind her. They stabbed her in the back of the head, killing her instantly. The two buried her body at a deserted spot in the village. Since that day, the beggar always saw the woman in his dreams, taking revenge on him, which scared him terribly. The beggar then asked the female exorcist for help. The woman used her magic to capture the young girl's spirit. She cast a spell and placed a charm into a large box, which she put onto the girl's corpse before covering it with dirt. Su spoke in a sobbing voice, regret visible on his face. He later died after finishing telling the story, his eyes wide open. A few days later, the villagers also found the beggar's corpse, with a stick stabbed into one of his eyes. It looked horrifying. It turned out that the young girl's grave had been dug open by animals in the forest, and her spirit had invoked to take revenge on those who had harmed her. This creepy story has been told by the villagers for many years. It is believed that the thick fog surrounding the village was created by the female ghost. This is a true scary story that once happened to me. That day, to celebrate the successful undertaking of the new construction entity in town, I asked my twin brother to have some beers with me. Actually, it was this guy who helped me easily undertake the construction for the main bridge in town back in the day. I went to the city to receive construction education while he stayed in our hometown, working as a manager. As we were drinking, we recalled our past memories. We had always been close together when we were kids. My brother asked me about our parents, as he hadn't seen them for a while. I reassured him that they were still fine and missed him terribly, and that they would come visit him soon. We spent the whole afternoon drinking and talking until it was getting dark. As we had gotten a bit wasted, we decided to leave for home. My brother suggested walking to his house, as it would be a great way to sober up fast and also allow us to do some sightseeing on the way. Since the construction area was near his house, I agreed with his idea. I always wanted to take a walk around there. So we staggered all the way home, arm in arm. I didn't know if it was the childhood memories that became so vivid to me at that time, but I suddenly told my brother to bathe in the river with me. It was this river that my brother and I usually went to take a bath and back in the day together. We walked down the riverside. The soft green grass appeared so projectively beautiful under the moonlight. Old habits die hard. We took off our clothes as soon as we got to the river, just like the days when we were kids. We swam rapidly in the water. The atmosphere in the place was still the same. Nothing had changed since the day I left for the city. After swimming for a while, we continued to soak in the water. All of a sudden, the water became colder, which seemed bizarre to me. I asked my brother about it, but he quickly reassured me that it was just a normal phenomenon. As I was listening to him, I was startled by something before my eyes. In a moment, I saw a kid appearing behind my brother in a scary manner. He let out a smile that stretched wide to his ears. His eyes were dead white, and his face was strangely pale, looking lifeless. I rubbed my eyes, trying to regain my composure while assuring myself that it was just a hallucination. Seeing me acting bizarrely, my brother asked me if I was okay. I said I saw something behind him, but at that moment, the water's surface was still, and there was nothing out of the ordinary taking place. As the water became colder and colder, I urged my brother to swim ashore quickly. As soon as I finished my sentence, I was startled when something freezing cold touched my legs. The feeling was so realistic. Despite being pretty nervous, I didn't want to tell my brother, as he wouldn't believe me either. My premonition told me to get ashore as soon as possible. Seeing the anxious look on my face, my brother agreed to swim ashore. As he worried I would catch a cold. As we were on our way toward the land, something suddenly grabbed me and pulled me down. I let out a terrified scream, which instantly caught my brother's attention. Now, as I was sinking into the cold water, only my hands were visible above the surface as I waved for help. Right at that moment, my brother came to my rescue just in time. However, there was a mysterious force trying to pull me down again. It was considerably stronger than that of a human. Eventually, my brother succeeded in his attempt to save me from death. He grabbed me tightly with one of his arms and used all his strength to make it ashore. As we made it onto land, he let me lie on the grass while performing CPR on me. After resuscitation, I slowly regained consciousness. My brother helped me up and then asked me what had happened. I told him there was something trying to pull me down to the bottom, but I didn't have any idea what it was. I told him that it must have been something spooky, which I assumed was the ghost I'd previously seen standing behind him, that caused the incident. I pointed at the bruise near my ankle. There was still a black mark in the shape of a human hand left on it. How terrifyingly clear the mark looked now. As I had recalled everything, I remembered looking down as I was being pulled down and saw something that would surely haunt me for the rest of my life. That creepy creature looked at me and let out another demonic smile. It looked like a child's corpse. He grabbed my legs tightly and stared into my soul, as if he wanted to eat me alive. But what was even scarier was that the child looked quite familiar to me. We were terrified by what had just happened, but none of us had any explanation for the creature to appear and try to kill me that night. Later, I returned to my city. One day, as I was enjoying a sauna, something cracked my legs and pulled strongly, which made me startle. As things happened so unexpectedly, I couldn't do anything but let out a scream. As I was dragged into the pool, I once again saw the demonic smile of that creepy creature I encountered at the river that night. Somehow, it had followed me and tried to drown me again. Despite being pulled down, I was still aware of people nearby rushing to help me. It took them a while to hold my hands and drag me out of the pool. Everyone was astounded. They had no idea how I got myself into such a situation, as it would be out of the ordinary for someone to have a pool accident in the steam room, especially since the water was shallow. Suddenly, I had a strange feeling, as I sensed something familiar to me present here. It was him, my twin brother. He was standing next to me. How spooky that was. I remembered being saved by 3 people, but now only 2 of them were here to be seen. Was it true that the other guy was my twin brother? What the heck was happening here? Why did that ghost keep following me? Since that day, I didn't dare to go into the water again, as I was in fear of being assaulted by the ghost. It was him, my twin brother, whom I'd lost in that river 20 years ago. I could have saved him on that fateful day, but instead, I let him die at the bottom of that cold river. So, you see,